Hello and welcome to the What I'm Playing podcast, a podcast where I'm going to be talking about what I've been playing, anything that's recent in news, and any other topic that's on my mind that I want to talk about. I might use this space to talk about anything else I've been whether it's watching or listening to music-wise. Uh, and the whole idea is that this will be published every 2 weeks, kind of thing, alternating with the Destiny podcast that I posted last week. And this is generally just something I've been doing kind of as I'm experimenting with different ideas, and obviously podcasts is kind of something I have an interest in, and so that's kind of what I'm sort of experimenting with primarily with right now, but that could change in the future. And it just kind of working out what sort of works best for me and how what kind of things I can do. Uh, Heads up that the title of what I'm playing is a temporary title. I might stick with it or I might change it. It's kind of just like I wanted something to go with, much like the Untitled Destiny podcast, which is not intended to be its final name, but I was like, I don't want to get hung up on the name for something that I don't know if I'm going to continue forever or if it's going to carry on. And yeah, so that's the whole idea. If it suddenly changes, I'll obviously call it out and we'll figure out something else, and hopefully I can think of something that's sort of fitting. Though I think what I'm playing is a much more definitive title than Untitled Destiny podcast, which is not a great name, but I don't hate it at the same time. But yeah, everything is subject to change, including the schedule. So this is every 2 weeks, but that might become weekly. Depends how everything flows. It's very much just like trying things and just seeing what works. A heads up that this is actually being recorded earlier than the day I would have been posting, or that I would have been recording it. The whole kind of way I've been working these podcast ideas out is that I would essentially plan it kind of leading up to the day that I would post it, and then I would get up and I would basically write notes for everything I'm going to talk about, kind of get it all together, and then I would record on the same day and aim to post on the same day. Obviously, that workflow is kind of just seeing what works for me, but that might change. It might be better to get it done the day before, but it's also good to be kind of as close to up to date as news-wise as you can, especially if it's every 2 weeks and you don't want to kind of miss anything, which is not always possible anyway, but that's kind of the plan that I sort of had. But this one in particular is actually being recorded earlier because tomorrow, or at least the day this should go live, so today, as when you hopefully will be listening to this, I'll basically carrying some freelance work at Eurogamer and covering Prime Day deals. That I'm doing that for the first 3 days this week, so Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. And so yeah, I wouldn't have had time to kind of like stop doing that and do this. I'm kind of like, very focused on that. And this whole the whole schedule I'll kind of work out will depend on what I'm doing freelance wise, as I've also been doing some guides for Eurogamer every month or two. Recently did Diablo, Star Wars, I've done some Destiny stuff, Call of Duty last year, and Zelda, and so we're just kind of playing it by ear, seeing what works in the content, but then also in the schedule and how I sort of work around the freelance work that I'd also be doing. And so in today's show, I'll be talking about what I've been playing recently. Obviously, that's what we'll get into first, primarily with a lot of discussion on Final Fantasy XVI. And I'll also be talking about recent news, like what's going on with the I can't even talk. The Microsoft Activision acquisition. That's one of those. You should say that like 5 times fast. It's super easy. As well as the rumored Red Dead Redemption Remaster, Diablo 4's first season, and a couple of other things. If you have any feedback or questions or comments or whatever, feel free to fire away in the comments below. But yeah, let's get into it. So, first off, I'm going to talk about what I've been playing. I should note that the structure of all of this may change again. As I said, everything's subject to change. And so basically, I'll be focusing on like what I'm playing first, and then jumping into the news and any other topics. But of course, that may change, So we'll see how it goes, and this is kind of the structure I've sort of stuck with for now. So yeah, in terms of this first episode, because it's obviously the first episode and it's kind of not in the flow of things yet, I'm going to be talking about just a broad range of games, not spending too long on all of them, but just kind of wanted to give a general idea of what I've been playing in the last couple of months, basically. So obviously don't expect this number of games will come up every 2 weeks sort of thing, but I thought there's a lot of games here that I haven't spoken about, even on Twitter or even on my website, and so I thought, well, here would be a good place to kind of just give a few brief thoughts. So first off, I think the first game I wanted to talk about a bit was Deathloop, which I started, I can't remember now, I think it was 2021, at the beginning of 2021, I think it was when I tried it for the first time. and I played it for like 30 minutes, and it just wasn't clicking with me. It wasn't grabbing me at the time. Didn't stand out to me. Uh, I at the time, like in my mind, I wanted to, but I just didn't. It didn't click. And then just randomly, I think I can't remember what I felt like I wanted to play a shooter, and it was either I was going to thought, well, I'll try Deathloop, but then I was like thinking maybe I'll go back to Bioshock 2 because I finished Bioshock 1 and platinumed it, but I haven't finished Bioshock 2. I haven't played properly Bioshock 2. To be fair, I think I played the demo years and years ago, but that's about it. Don't remember absolutely. It's don't remember anything really. And Deathloop was what I went for, and it really stood out to me. It's funny because I'll be talking about Hitman in a bit, and so some of the stealth elements actually apply here, but not in the same way. But I'll get into that later. But yeah, I haven't finished it. The game's really interesting because obviously the way it's set up is that you're not always gonna. It's kind of like it's almost like like a roguelike in some sense, you know, where you sort of go in and you lose what you get at the end of the day, or you keep some things and you kind of like as you play more and more, you're kind of like leveling up and you're finding out more information, and that kind of allows you to then have a better advantage in future runs, sort of thing. And that the whole idea of that was really intriguing to me, and especially when you're playing it, there's actually a lot of it that doesn't feel super punishing. It actually feels really has a really nice flow to it. And it really clicked with me this time. As I said, I haven't finished it. I think I'd taken about 2 or 3 of the targets, but I think there's 6 in total. Or it's 4, 5, 6? I think it's about 6. Um, I could be wrong there, but yeah, I took out a couple of them, but didn't obviously like finish it because I think this was just before Tears of the Kingdom came out, which is what I'll talk about in a minute. Um, but yeah, I really enjoyed it. It's one I do want to get back to. I don't really know where the endpoint would be, what classifies as the endpoint, how easy it is to kind of complete it, you know, take out all the targets. I think that's obviously the point of the game. But yeah, so it's a good game and one I'm going to go back to and really cool. And it's a shame, obviously, because I played this actually around the time I think Redfall came out, and it's a shame to see what Arcane had done. And obviously, I really like Dishonored; those games are great. And then to see Redfall was kind of a bit of a frustrating situation, but obviously that's a bit of a deeper conversation and more going on there than meets the eye, I guess. Um, yeah, so next up is actually a game that kind of ties into a little bit of how I felt with Deathloop, and that's Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. So, for a bit of background, I got my Switch in 2016. I think it came out in 2016, and I got it at the end of the year. Oh, sorry, maybe it was 2017 even. And I got it at the end of the year, and I remember watching a streamer called King Gathalion, and he was playing Breath of the Wild, and his streams were awesome, and I thought the game looked incredible. And so I got my Switch towards the end of the year, and I played it, and I spent a while on it, but I didn't get much done, and I felt it just wasn't clicking with me at all, and I couldn't quite work it out, and I was always having this thing of like, okay, right, you know, like I would be like, okay, I want to follow the main story, and then I would start following that, but then I would be like, oh, but now I'm encountering enemies at this part that I'm struggling with, and now I've got to go and okay, right, well, I'll maybe do some shrines to get my hearts up, and then you have to do 4 shrines to get 1 heart, sort of thing, and it felt like I was spending a long time and not getting really anything done, and that felt really unrewarding to me, and I just still wasn't enjoying it, and I admire a lot of what the game was. I see why it's considered so good. I saw why it was considered so good, and but it just didn't click with me, and it's frustrating because I really wanted to play it, and I wanted to kind of be in on that, you know, when everyone else was loving it. And then Tears of the Kingdom, I was more interested in. At least I was watching the trailers. Obviously, I'd been seeing more of this compared to what I'd seen in Breath of the Wild, I think. And I thought the last trailer they showed, especially, I think same with a lot of people, was like a really strong trailer, and suddenly it made it look less like an expansion or like a DLC and more like, you know, like, oh wow, there's actually a ton to this game. And it is, I mean, is very similar in a lot of ways, but there's also a lot of new stuff at the same time. But I was kind of like thinking, like, do I get it? I'm not sure. Maybe I should play Breath of the Wild before I get it, you know, just so I can kind of just see how it feel. And I was going to I actually created a new user, went through the process, and I was like, considering, because there's the DLC you can get where I've forgotten the name of what you can buy the expansion pass, but there's a DLC particularly in it that gives you the ability to see where you've gone on the map. And I was gonna buy it on a new account, but then I was like, because you only have one save file on Zelda, right? So I was like, well, I don't want to delete that, but I also in the end, I was just like, screw it. Like I'm not going to go back to it. There's a bit of a sentimental value lost there because that was 15, 20 hours worth. But I started afresh and something clicked. And it was, I think what it was that because I understood the game a little bit more from the outset and I sort of knew what I was getting myself into, there was an element of not only that understanding, but I was also, because I understood it and I was more comfortable with the core experience, I was also starting to experiment more and explore. And even though I wasn't making tons of progress, I felt like I was learning things and my experimentation was paying off. And it was constantly as I was doing that I was like, wow, I'm starting to understand myself like properly while playing it, why people like it so much. I mean, like I said, I always sort of understood that, but like at least doing it myself without actually having seen all this. It's been a long time since I've seen anyone play it or read, so I don't really remember seeing anything. Um, and I was even the combat I remember sort of struggling with, but this time I just didn't have much of a problem with it, and I actually, and I was trying things like, okay, I'm gonna shoot with my, fire some arrows from over here and from afar and get headshots, deal more damage, and just in that whole loop, it really clicked, and I felt bad because I was like, well, I feel like I should play this or I should finish this, but there was also the impetus of um doing some guides for Eurogamer, and I was also like, it's the new thing. There was also a lot, weapon durability was something I wasn't sure on in the original, though less of a problem. I didn't find it as problematic when I went back to Breath of the Wild before Tears, but I was kind of like, that fuse feature, or that sort of, what we call it, ability was like appealing to me because I was like, wow, this, I wonder how crazy that is. And so there were a lot of things kind of pulling me toward Tears of the Kingdom over Breath of the Wild. And I got Tears, and again, it was like the same thing. And I spent a long time on that first like area, just like exploring. And then I went, the Sky Island, and then sort of as I jumped off it, and you get to like the main area, and then that's obviously when I was doing some of the stuff for Eurogamer, writing about the guides and the shrines and stuff, all the guides for all the shrines. I think I did four guides for each, for a different shrine. And yeah, it clicked with me, and I was really like, I just had a blast playing it, honestly, and was really happy because I found over time sometimes I'm playing games and like I feel like I'm almost disagreeing with a lot of people. Like a lot of people saying, "Oh, this is amazing," and either I disagree or I don't quite have the same feeling whilst I'm playing it, kind of thing. And that's what I was kind of frustrated with Breath of the Wild, because I was like, and what I was worried I was going to have with Tears was that I was like, oh man, everyone's saying they're loving this game, and I get why, but I don't feel it myself. Like I'm not feeling that in the game myself. But when I just let myself kind of direct myself and take, my kind of my imagination, my exploration, and like actually just letting myself explore, taking my time, not worrying about getting anything done, but just simply soaking everything in and exploring and going like, oh, what's up there, what's around there, and actually feeling pretty rewarded for it, which I don't remember feeling when I played Breath of the Wild a few years ago. But there was a lot to it, and I was understanding, and I knew more things about it, and it was a learning experience, and there was just a lot of cool stuff in Tears of the Kingdom that has really kind of surprised me, and I really sort of enjoyed what I played. Obviously, I didn't play tons overall, and that's still want to get back to, and that's because of other things coming out. I think Destiny's next season came out at the end of the month. I think there was something else. Wasn't there something else in May? I feel like there was. I'm not sure, but then as I transitioned to my next game, Diablo 4 came out, and that was kind of, that kind of pulled me away from things. But yeah, so I need to get back to that, and I do want to, but obviously with playing Final Fantasy right now and being on quite a high on Final Fantasy, I'm sort of like, I'm not too sure when I go back to Tears, but I think about it quite a lot. Uh, and it's one that I think I always want to like play a bit of every now and again, because it's one of those you don't really stop playing and then come back to, and obviously that's what I've already done, so maybe I won't enjoy it as much when I go back, but hopefully I will, and I do want to go back to it, so that is something on the docket for me to eventually get to. But yeah, next up, as I sort of alluded to a minute ago, Diablo 4. I played the beta in, I think it was March, or was it April, or something like that. And I was curious about it because, with playing Destiny and liking Borderlands and games like that, RPGs, looter shooters in that sense, I was curious about Diablo because of the similar kind of the loot grind and that kind of the end game content and all that stuff and the RPG elements. And so I was curious about Diablo. I played Diablo 3. I think I beat it on PS3. I got it on PS4 and then barely played it. Which is of course the case with many games. Um, but I really gotta say I really enjoyed the beta, and so I got it at launch, and I haven't finished the campaign yet because I played about 40 or 50 hours, doing a lot of open world side stuff and side quests and things like that. But I was also writing some guides for Eurogamer again, so that was when I had to do a collectible guide for the Altars of Lilith in Skosglen was the region, and that took a while. A lot of running around and also trying to, because I was uncovering the map at the same time and I hadn't gone there in the story just at that point when I first started it. I was kind of like wanting to find, and because of the way the world looks, it's difficult to actually always see where they are. And so I was basically trying to get screenshots of like because they have a red glow on them before you activate them. So I was basically getting a screenshot of them, and then I was getting a screenshot of them on the map. But because I hadn't uncovered all the map as I was going through them all, I then had to do like a whole circle round afterwards to try and get screenshots of the maps, just so I can kind of give a better visual for people using that guide sort of thing. And yeah, I'm obviously planning to go back before season 1 starts. We'll talk about that a bit later. So I can finish the campaign, so I'm ready for when that comes out. But I'll obviously talk more about that later. And so yeah, so I'll leave that for there for Diablo because obviously I'll be talking about it later in the show. But yeah, good game, really enjoyed it, and you know, really honestly, I played a sorcerer for anyone interested, and I had a blast, much like Breath of the Wild. Tears of the Kingdom. Well, I guess both now. So yeah, that's good. I'll get back. I'll talk more about that later. I'm gonna get on to a couple of miscellaneous games now, or a few, I suppose. The first one is Mario Kart 8, which I played for the first time about 3 or 4 weeks ago, and I was surprised because I wasn't winning loads, and I don't think I'm all that good at it at the moment. But just kind of playing it and seeing what the game has to offer, I was honestly pleasantly surprised by the game, and there was a lot of obviously I'm still learning about the game. A lot it doesn't actually tell you straight away. At least I jumped into co-op pretty much straight away, so I guess maybe it does if you don't do that. Um, but the one thing that really stood out to me was not only was it kind of just quite a relaxing game to play in a way, not including all of the any sort of competitive nature of it. I'm sure that's where it doesn't become as relaxing or chill, but uh the tracks, I was really impressed with the different locations and the different kind of quirks they each have. Not only in like their level design, but also just the visuals and just how it all comes together. There's an Animal Crossing track where it actually has different, the different seasons, and that changes how the map looks. And not only that, or at least as far as I understand, and then not only that, much like the Zelda track, it actually changes the coins that you pick up, I think the sound and how they look. And so in Zelda, it's like the rupees that you're picking up. And I thought these little touches are so good. Like they're so smart and they're so minor. They you don't need to have them, but it really adds to that kind of selling the fact that you're playing there. In that racing in that location. And yeah, I was just really impressed, honestly, and it's one I want to get back to. Probably just gonna be a fun party game I play from time to time. So just knocking off a couple others. I've played Mario Bros. U Deluxe. I played a little bit of that, probably about 4 or 5 of the levels, so very, very early on. That was mainly after the announcement of Mario Bros. Wonder. I was just kind of like seeing what the game was like. Seems fun. Nothing crazy to say about that, but again, something I wouldn't mind going back to. I tried Fallout 76 again very briefly because for a while I've wanted them to patch 60 FPS into the game, and the most recent update didn't call it out in the patch notes, but yet it has made it 60. So I just loaded it up just to see what it was like, and yeah, it's really nice to be able to play a Fallout game at 60 FPS now, and actually it made the combat feel a little bit better, but I didn't really play much of that. And that sort of the same goes for the next game here, where I played No Man's Sky, sort of went back to. It's almost like one I want to go back to over time, No Man's Sky, just because there's various sort of things I want to sort of check out. And there's a lot of things I have missed out on, but it's a huge game now. Very different. If you haven't played No Man's Sky since launch or you don't know much about it, very different story. And yeah, and then I've also tried the demo for Street Fighter 6, which I was kind of shocked by. I don't know what the beta was like, because I think they had a beta as well, but the demo was really light on content. And then there was a demo, but I was kind of like, you get like one arena and 2 fighters, and yet there's like 20 fighters and like 10 or 12 arenas. I was like, really? You couldn't give like 4 fighters and 2 arenas, that you can give a little bit more? So I didn't really get to experience too much there, and but I'm sort of curious about it because the new Street Fighter does sound interesting. It sounds like there's a lot of stuff that actually helps people that are not as familiar with fighting games kind of get into it. My history with fighting games is kind of all over the place. I beat the story, I think, for Mortal Kombat 11. I think I beat the story for that, and I beat the story for Injustice 2. I enjoyed them. Didn't really play too much beyond that, but there were elements that I kind of wanted to try out more. But yeah, I don't know if I'll get Street Fighter 6, but I kind of enjoyed the demo. It was okay. Nothing mind blowing, but still something that maybe I wouldn't mind picking up at some point if it goes cheap. But I've heard very good things about it, and it sounds like it's really good if you're new to fighting games too. And so next up, we're going to focus on the two more sort of bigger games that I've been playing and spent a lot of time with in the last sort of month here. And one of them I've written a review for the second game of, and I've written a review of the third game, but it's not live right now. I'm sort of figuring out when I'm going to get to that, because obviously I've got, the freelance stuff and recording this, and so... but the game is Hitman, which I have neglected the second and third games for a long time, and recently it was just like, it was because I didn't want to play Diablo and just be like, I'm going to play this game, because I was like, I want to play a story game before Final Fantasy. I was like, I've got 2 weeks, what can I play that's something that I haven't played, rather than just spending my time doing all loot grinding stuff in Diablo. Even though I haven't finished the campaign, but obviously I'll get to that, and I was kind of like, well, I knew I'd come back for Season 1 anyway. So, yeah, so I went to Hitman, and as I said, review of Hitman 2 is up. Hitman 3 review I've got written, and I'll get that up soonish, hopefully. And I have a review from 2017, I think it was, of Hitman 1. But yeah, this game is awesome, and it has totally reminded me of why stealth games are so good. Like for anyone who doesn't, who's, I guess, is new, it's weird. I guess a lot of people probably don't know it because there's not been many stealth games, or I don't talk about them very often. But I love stealth games. Uh, like one of my favorite, I love Splinter Cell back on PS2. I even really like Splinter Cell Blacklist. I platinumed that, and it was awesome. And maybe it doesn't hold up as well as I remember, but there were so many things I thought were really cool about it. I didn't mind Splinter Cell Conviction either. I thought the story of that was really cool. But yeah, Metal Gear Solid's weird because I like the stealth stuff, but I also am not necessarily. I don't. Well, it's Metal Gear Solid's a weird one because even though it's a stealth game, it's like you wouldn't fully class it. It's kind of in this weird space where it's obviously a stealth game, but it has all like the boss fights and things like that. So it kind of, while it is a stealth game, there's also a lot to it that I think sort of it's a different kind of stealth game, if you know what I mean. Like it's not the kind of stealth games that I like very much are like the Splinter Cell, where it's fully like, you're an agent and you're going in, and it's it's talking about political nature and terrorists and all things you don't want to, all the bad things kind of thing, which I guess Metal Gear Solid also has, but it's also got the really extravagant aspects of like huge mech things and crazy bosses. It's kind of a little bit as much as it does involve itself with those topics, it kind of, like this. I mean, because to be honest, there are a lot of there's a deep political side to Metal Gear Solid, but it's kind of a little bit flamboyant almost and over the top, if you know what I mean. Whereas Splinter Cell is a little bit more grounded and realistic. It's also why The Last of Us I really like, even though I don't know if people class that as a stealth game, but there's a lot of stealth in that, and I just enjoy stealth in games. But what it feels like to me is that stealth over time has become less of a genre and more of a mechanic or a feature, in games that they're sort of, and that's fine, but it also sometimes feels like when games try and do stealth, they're not, because they're not committed to it, they don't execute on it perfectly, whereas something like Hitman and the old Splinter Cell games and Metal Gear and everything obviously totally do, are sort of complex and very well designed in that regard. And so yeah, Hitman's just really cool, and it's been a long time since I played a stealth game, unless you include Deathloop. But I don't fully consider it's not like this third person espionage, sneaky game. It's kind of a different sort. But I want to keep returning to Hitman a little bit more because of all the side content and the player created contracts and the different challenges they have from time to time and unlockables. I've just been really impressed. As I said, you can read my review of Hitman 2 and soon Hitman 3, which kind of elaborates on more specifically about those games. But it's also just like one of my favorite aspects of Hitman was like these cutscenes that you get before going into missions that, these briefing cutscenes that are just really, they're really engaging to me, and they feel like a proper briefing, and they have like awesome music, and the dialogue's really good. It's very, punchy, and it just feels like kind of gets you hyped up for the mission a little bit. You're excited to kind of check out this new location, see what's there, what's going on. And once you load in, it's kind of like it's almost like the world is your oyster kind of thing. Like that, there's just so much to go and go. So many different areas you can go to, and so many things you could do that it feels so expansive, and it really is. It's almost like every level is almost like its own. It's like its own mini sandbox kind of thing, and it's really impressive. And actually, one thing I started doing recently on Hitman was that I started doing suit only runs, where obviously the core mechanic of the game is that you can use disguises to kind of sneak past certain enemies and kind of get through areas that you wouldn't usually be able to get to. But when you play suit only, there's this real like deeper level of stealth that you kind of get into, because now it's more about thinking about the levels, distracting enemies in the right ways, taking out your targets, being stealthy. It's very, and it feels a lot closer to what I would have gone with Splinter Cell, except almost more difficult because you have more things to think about, because you've got all the different NPCs and crowds that can see you. Certain people will, question why you're in certain places. You obviously can't hold like your gun out or even a knife out, because obviously people will be like, why are you holding that? That's a lethal item. Um, doesn't always, it can seem a bit weird. Sometimes you're holding something, I'm like, how does no one question why I'm holding this? But, generally it makes sense. And there was one, I think it was Marrakesh in Hitman 1. Obviously one thing I haven't said is that Hitman 1, 2, and 3 are all put into the same game, and it's called World of Assassination now, and so that's like the whole, you know, they've consolidated all the maps into one, and it's a really cool sort of package there. But yeah, I was playing Marrakesh, and you go through like an office building and an underground like car park, and doing all of that in suit only, especially sneaking around an office where you've got people working, is was really cool, because I was like, some people don't care, some people see you and they don't care, but then you have the guard patrols on very specific patterns, and you've got to kind of sneak past them, and just the whole satisfaction of like just distracting a guard, sending him over someone, quickly grabbing him, knocking him out, and hiding his body, and then sneaking past like nothing's gone on, nothing's happened, is really just awesome. There's so much satisfaction you can get from stealth games, and even just talking about it now, like, man, I need to get back to Hitman. It's so good. It's honestly so good. It's it really is questionable why I've taken so long to actually get back to it. Um, but that's me. That's me being. It's a mood thing as well, and I don't think I would have realized until I played him. I was like, oh my god, why did I take so long to play this? It's awesome, so good. If you're a fan of stealth, you should check it out. And of course, you can mess around and do stupid stuff as well. I started attacking people with feather dusters as well. It's like it was a big feather duster, it wasn't like a small one, but yeah, really really fun game, honestly, and definitely recommend, highly recommend. And of course, if you play the game now, World of Assassination, you get all of Hitman 1, 2, and 3 in one game. And it's a really, really cool package, really like what they've done. And it's only like 70 or 80 gigs in size on PS5, so it's like, you got all of this stuff in the game, and yet it's not even as big as like a lot of the other games, even live service games now. It's a really reasonable size and a really good game, and totally recommend downloading it if you've got the space and if you've got the time. Uh, I would say one of the best games this year, but like I guess one of the best games I've played this year. And again, it's one that I intend to keep going back to, as long as other games don't keep getting me hooked, because as what I'm about to talk about in a minute, Final Fantasy 16 has me really hooked right now. So yeah, Final Fantasy 16 came out just over a couple of weeks ago, and I still haven't finished it. But this is, I think, most certainly my game of the year. I especially right now. I mean, that's going up against Dead Space, which I think was a really good remake. But there's just so much good about this game. Honestly, it is. I feel like it's almost everything I want from a game. Like sincerely. And what's crazy is it just feels like it keeps getting better and better. I'm going to be keeping this spoiler free. or at least as much as I can. I mean, certainly not talking about story spoilers, but there was a particular part I did last night that, or a boss fight I did, that was just incredible. Like, it's almost. Again, I don't want to say anything until it's going to be one of those. I'm just like, I'm not going to say anything because I want to make sure that, people get to play this game unscathed, get to kind of play through it properly. And I think I'm at the game. I think the PS5 says I'm about 68% of the way through right now of the story. I don't know if that track is particularly reliable though, because it jumped. I'm pretty sure it jumped to 20% very quickly at the beginning of the game, and then it's gone really slow since. Um, but yeah, there's just so much good at this game. I'm doing a lot of the side quests as I'm going. Not so much doing the hunts unless I come across an enemy. I came across one who was 6 levels higher than me last night, which I wasn't too sure how that would go, but I managed to get it. But obviously, I'm gonna have to see how other ones go. But I'm generally thinking I might leave that till I finish the game, or at least close to the end anyway. Um, just because I kind of want to make sure I get the story. So I'm hoping I can finish the story sort of soonish, but obviously it is seemingly quite lengthy. But it's funny because I played the demo of this. I've already covered this in a video and article before, but with like my impressions before. But I played the demo and I wasn't planning on playing it fully because I was just like in the first place I wasn't even sure I was going to play the demo because I was like I have it pre-ordered. I'm in on this game. And I'm not even a huge Final Fantasy fan. Like the only Final Fantasy I have played and finished is Final Fantasy 15, and I did platinum that as well. But I played a bit of Final Fantasy 7 remake. I thought that was okay from what I played. Not that it was terrible. Like I enjoyed the story. I found it interesting, but I don't think it was clicking with me right at that point. And the combat I thought was okay. Again, it just didn't feel like just something wasn't clicking right for that for me at that point. But it is one I want to go back to because I'm also interested in Rebirth and everything when that comes out. But yeah, I'm still pretty new to Final Fantasy. Like I'm not too sure what to expect. All of the lore and there's certain things I know. Like I obviously the icon Ifrit I know from Final Fantasy 15. Sort of vaguely, but that's the only one I can really remember. As far as I'm pretty sure anyway. I'm not too sure. I mean, there's probably others in there, but there's not much I can actually remember about Final Fantasy core lore. I know the Moogles, I know those little creatures I've sort of seen in the other games. But yeah, a lot of this is new to me. But this is just a really amazing game. It is let down a little bit by the performance and some almost kind of like you go from like really high budget stuff to like kind of low budget stuff, which can be a little bit disappointing, but it's not too bad. But yeah, it's generally like the game. I think sometimes the game struggles almost in pacing as well. Like sometimes you'll have points where you go to sort of just like really extensive story bit, and then you might have like it's fair enough to have like something cool down, but you have a lot of dialogue, and then you have a lot of very side quest like main story stuff, and then when you finish that, the game's like, okay, now you can carry on with the story, or you can do more side quests, and that's a bit frustrating to me because it's like I almost wish I could do those side quests instead of the main that kind of side stuff that's like the side stuff that feels like side stuff, but it's kind of main story. You need that to carry on with the story. I don't hate it, but sometimes it can be sort of like, oh yeah, I just want to carry on with the story, but I'm also doing side quests, and so when you do something that feels like a long side quest, and then you're like given more side quests, it can feel a little bit frustrating because it's like, oh man, I almost wish those because I don't really want to do all the side quests necessarily, but I'm kind of got in my head that I'm enjoying this game so much I want to go for the platinum. And not to say I don't want to do side quests at all, just that the story is so good that I want to carry on playing the story. But yeah, it's just incredible, and that's I haven't spoken too much about the story, but the story is really the thing that's driving me more to play the game. But then I play that, and you get into some of the combat and the abilities you get, and just how good it feels, and it is very much like Devil May Cry, but it's a different version of Devil May Cry, and it's kind of just got just the right amount of depth where you feel like there are certain things you can pull off that's not as complex on the controls as a DMC, but yet you feel almost as much of a badass and as much of a you know as powerful and almost stylish as you do in Devil May Cry, and even though that depth, and that's not to say like you just pressing buttons and the game's doing it for you. It's just the fact that your abilities feel so powerful, everything's so satisfying, and if you dodge at the right time, that gives you something. If you parry an enemy by sort of countering by hitting them at the same time they hit you, you sort of it goes into like slow motion. You get like a small window of high damage, And there are a lot of like RPG elements where you can stagger bosses and things like that. And and then you can like really lean into like damage stacking and throwing all your abilities at the enemies. And and there's one ability that I've got, which this isn't. It's a fairly early game ability, so I guess skip about 30 seconds if you don't want to hear me talk about it. But it's from the second icon set of abilities you get. Well, isn't you start the game with one, and then you get a second set later. Uh, and it's basically the power of wind, and this ability lets you create this huge tornado, and it just picks up the enemies and throws them around, and it is absolutely ridiculous. It feels so powerful, but not only that, it's a good tool to stun enemies. You can throw that to one side, and it's funny because obviously there were kind of reports of people's PS5s overheating. Apparently, according to a Push Square article I saw, that was primarily if you're playing on quality mode, but it seems to be. I don't know if that's definitely the case for everything, but I've still been sort of like concerned about that and anxious like as I'm playing. So when the game's kind of getting really intense just in combat, I'm like, okay, because there's so many particle effects and there's tornadoes on the screen, it's fucking insane. Um, but yeah, very strong game of the year contender. I think the only, I guess one thing is that like the RPG elements in terms of the stats and that stuff doesn't feel as involved as maybe I was hoping it would be, but I wouldn't entirely say I'm against how it is either. Like maybe it's because I'm not fully into like an end game part of the game, or I've not played enough of it. I mean, if I've played I'm like 25, 30 hours into it, I think, or maybe even more, maybe like 40 hours. I think PSN probably says me I'm at like 50 hours or something, but I've not actually been playing that entire time. Um, but yeah, I think the RPG elements just feel like they maybe could have been a bit deeper, but I wouldn't say they're bad either. And of course, I've not properly tinkered around with them. And you still get to like customize in ways. If you're leaning into a set of abilities, you can kind of boost their damage, their cooldown. You can lean into things like that. And of course, there's probably still a lot I haven't yet seen. So I'm hoping that there's going to be a fair bit more in that regard. But certainly, based on my previous impressions, when I said it wasn't that deep, it's gotten deeper since then. Not too much, but it's certainly evolved and feels a little bit more, uh, you know, game changing than it did. Particularly one accessory I've gotten that has a really cool ability. Um, but yeah, I want to go for the platinum in this. But it's truly just an amazing game, and I highly recommend you play it. I think this is a game that I'm probably gonna be recommending for a long time. Honestly, I just think I think it's the best game I played on PS5. I think it's one of the most interesting stories in a game I've played in a while. It's got a really strong set of characters, really well voice acted. The soundtrack is absolutely incredible, and it's constantly surprising with just new pieces of music that are just insane. But like I said, that boss fight I got to last night is just wild, especially with the music. And it really is. This really is a amazing game, and I think a ton of people should go and check it out. And game of the year contender for sure. Obviously, I can't fully say definitively right now. I've not finished the game. I don't see how it's going to change, but I am really into this game, and there's a lot about it I like. Very good game. One of my, I think certainly like I said, best PS5 game I've played. I'm pretty certain in saying that. I'm pretty confident. Sorry, in saying that. I don't think any other game has quite matched this on PS5 for me just yet. Or yet, in the past. Sorry. I actually don't know what I would say is my favorite game on PS5. Outside of this, but yeah, it certainly feels like a standout game, and yes, very much recommended. This is a very good game. Like I said, performance issues aside, that even like I've had the frame rate drop. Unfortunately, it stays pretty consistent in combat, but even that can drop sometimes. Um, at least I think it can. It seems to have. It certainly out of combat does, but in combat it's generally fine. But I'm sure there's been a few sort of hitches and a few sort of stutters there, but nothing terrible. And it's not something that's really bothering me. It's bothering me in the sense that I just wish I could play like the perfect version of the game, if you know what I mean. But it's not bothering me in like it brings the game down like an it's not game breaking or whatever. So yeah, very good game. I think game of the year, honestly. That's where I'm at right now. Um, but yeah, so I may talk more. I thought about maybe talking about my favorite games, this year so far at some point. I was thinking of talking about it here, but I might save that for a bit for another time. Um, but I wanted to get into some news, and there's been a few news stories that I've got here, and the first one is to do with the Red Dead Redemption Remaster. I'm using Eurogamer, their article, as the source for this story, and essentially, at the time of recording, about 2 weeks ago, I think, the Korean ratings board had a listing for Red Dead Redemption suddenly go up, and it was for a new console version, not PC. Though there's a Gamatsu report that I had a look at, and they say it doesn't exclude the possibility of a PC version, but it just means that they've listed a new console version. And this isn't actually the first time a rumor for a Red Dead Redemption remaster has actually surfaced. As Eurogamer mentions, back in July 2022, Eurogamer says, quote, a Kotaku report claimed that work on Red Dead Redemption and Grand Theft Auto 4 remasters had been underway within Rockstar, but that these projects had been shelved due to the poor reception of the GTA trilogy release, end quote. And actually, just under a year on from that original Kotaku report, the author has actually tweeted about this, and they said, quote, as I previously reported, there had been plans for an RDR1 remaster / remake for a while, but post-GTA Trilogy debacle, these plans have got shelved. However, I was told that the RDR1 remaster wasn't dead, that just taking a pause until closer or after GTA 6's launch, end quote. And to further cement this, the former editor at IGN, now host of Sacred Symbols podcast, Colin Moriarty, mentioned that he, quote, has seen confirmation that this is real, end quote. And I've left all the sources in the description so you can check out all of those and everything. But certainly with Colin's kind of cementing, of this, even though it seemed very real anyway, having him kind of like have that input there as well kind of really seals the deal, I think. And it's all looking really very real, and this is really exciting, honestly, because I've played a very small amount of the first Red Dead. I played a bit of its Undead Nightmare DLC, and I played about 15-20 hours of Red Dead Redemption 2, but I've never finished them, never properly played them. And if this is coming with all like what we'd expect, 60 FPS, like performance mode and everything, this would be really cool to see, and it will certainly be one I'll be checking out. And especially if they can have this alongside a PS5 and, like a current gen / next gen version, Series X and PS5 version of Red Dead Redemption 2 as well, that's also 60 FPS. That'll be really great too, because that's kind of the thing that's what I've been waiting for this entire time. I'm shocked they haven't done it already, but if they're going to do them both at the same time, hopefully, it seems like it's just Red Dead 1 for now, but if they do Red Dead 2 as well, that's the dream. And obviously, hopefully it's better than the launch date of the Grove Street remasters of GTA 3 Vice City and San Andreas that came out a few years ago. So yeah, very, very much looking forward to that. I'll be certainly, hopefully it is 60 FPS. I don't see why it wouldn't be, but that'll be something that I'm very interested in playing when that comes out. So moving on, the next thing I want to talk about, I wrote quite a bit about this, but I'm probably just going to try and rattle off through this as fast as possible. But that's to do with the Activision acquisition that Microsoft are sort of going through right now. Obviously, a couple of weeks ago, they've just had the hearings in court with the FTC, or Microsoft against the FTC. And I've not really been watching this or going to any particular source for this. I've just been kind of jumping around Twitter and hearing what people have said on various podcasts. And at the moment, at the time of recording, we haven't actually heard on whether this injunction is going to be filed or not. So it does seem like things can go either way. I think it will go through, and I think they will. Or at least, sorry, I think that this deal will go through, and Microsoft will buy them. But which I don't particularly love, and so we're gonna get into that now. I'm going to talk about my thoughts on it really, because I'm kind of two minds. Like, on one hand, I like what this could potentially do for some of Activision's more dormant franchises. I also think opening, or like giving, hopefully, Activision a better, like culturally and just workplace practices, like hopefully Microsoft taking over will sort out a lot of the problematic things that have been going on for so long, and over time that have been, alleged and reported for a while now. And I'm hoping that, with Microsoft in control, that will all get sorted out and that things will be better, kind of thing. But at the same time, like, at least when we talk about this from a business standpoint, I mean, from a business standpoint for Microsoft, this is great, and probably for Activision as well. But I'm not too sure how I feel about it. Really, I'm not too sure why so many are in support of it. Outside of the things I've just said, which isn't always what people are arguing. Not, I see very few people arguing and saying, being for it because of what I've just said. A lot of people just seem to want it for whether because they align themselves with the Xbox brand or what, or maybe they just want competition. I think because I don't think this is the right way to do competition, but at the same time, I'm sure it will create a bit of competition, but I don't really want PlayStation to like start trying to make a COD competitor because I want the thing I want from PlayStation personally, selfishly, is just the single player games. Uh, and we are still in the dark. And we already know there's a bunch of live service games from PlayStation, and that's already a future I'm not too sure about because I don't want that to become what PlayStation is, and I don't think it will be. But there were some reports I'm sure before where it was saying that their spending of live service games is going to increase, and within a few years it's going to be 60% on live service and 40% on the other games. I think, as far as I understand it, and that's not something I'm particularly for. I don't like that much. I'm thinking that's not what PlayStation is. That's not what PlayStation has ever been. I'm not saying you shouldn't try out, live service initiatives and trying to work on that side of games, but I just don't think that's what PlayStation should be focusing on. Um, Obviously, part of the argument for all of this is that people want Xbox to compete, and they also think because PlayStation has a lot of exclusives, not only first party games, but also like the third party deals as well as various like exclusive content in games. Like Call of Duty gets like the extra loadout slots and just random shit like that. That's so strange, honestly. Um, but I agree that I want Xbox to compete with PlayStation. I think that that's when we get the better products. That's when we get the better games. That's when we get but this isn't Xbox competing on a creative level. This is them competing on a monetary level, which obviously PlayStation could not equal. It doesn't mean they can't do big deals, but they can't do a $69 billion acquisition. At least I'm pretty certain they can't. Um, Definitely not in the same way as this. But I'll be honest, like I thought Xbox's showcase recently was pretty good. I know there's obviously that's if when they release their games, it's going to be a bit longer before the next lot of games come out. But I thought they had a really good showcase, and so I'm like, so why do they need Activision? And obviously their push is mobile, but it's like as much as that is what they want it for, the discussion is obviously about other things like Call of Duty and whether it's going to go exclusive. And obviously, Jim Ryan said that he's not bothered about that, and Xbox have been quite against the idea of doing it. I don't think it would be sustainable for them to be like making Call of Duty exclusive anyway. But obviously, there's more than just Call of Duty that is potentially at risk of going exclusive. That it could apply to other games, Crash Bandicoot, Spyro, all the things, and I just sort of think, well, if it's about mobile, then why is there so much discussion about these exclusives? Because clearly it's not just about mobile, because you're debating whether or not you're going to change the way things are otherwise. And it's what's also frustrating is that Xbox haven't had a great track record in the last few years, with notable problematic releases like Halo Infinite and Redfall. And they've taken a long time to really get information about what's upcoming, until this year. And it's kind of like, is it, even though things look better now, and I'm sure they will be, I'm pretty confident in Xbox. I think they're going to have these upcoming games. They're going to have, especially Starfield, which looks awesome. I'm pretty certain it's going to be a good future for them now. I think they're on the right path. But when you look at the track record, can we really have confidence that they will be able to take a hold of Activision and really turn that into something positive? I don't really know if we can. And obviously, a lot of this is also bolstering Game Pass, which for some thoughts on Game Pass, I like Game Pass. I like what it does for players, but I really do not believe that it is sustainable, especially if you're releasing big budget AAA titles on it several times a year. Because the Last of Us 2 cost $220 million, and you sell that for, I think at the time it was $60, which now would be $70. How does a $10, which I think is now gone to $11 or $12 a month, so just but about $10, how does $10 a month for not only those big budget titles but also a plethora of other games, how can you make profit on a game when you're putting it on there. Like, it's not possible. They say it's possible. They say it's profitable, but I'm like, or it's sustainable or whatever. But I'm like, but how? Like, I just don't understand how. Like, fundamentally, that doesn't make any sense. It doesn't, and people don't question that. And what it could mean is that if it's not sustainable, the quality of games will be lowered, so they can put more on there. But this isn't to say it's bad to have Game Pass, it's bad for it to exist, but I'm like, I think Game Pass is a decent model. I think that's cool, and I think it can work for a lot. You can have a lot of great indie games on there, some smaller budget titles on there, and it could thrive with that. But I think maybe Microsoft realized that it wouldn't do that because people want the big AAA games on there, otherwise they wouldn't buy into it much. So I understand some push of it, but it's also like, does it have to be in this way, kind of thing? And I know some of like the increasing budgets and things like that is just kind of where the industry is going. A lot of things are going to be costing more to make, but I think like dev times are growing, and I think they're becoming unsustainable. And the same can be said about budgets. I do think we're going to hit like a peak at some point soon, and it's going to suddenly reverse, and then we're going to start to see more kind of varied budgets and development timelines. Not necessarily for all games, like something like Gran Turismo. Grand Theft Auto 6 is going to take or has taken a long time, and it will be a huge budget game. A game like Starfield, Final Fantasy 16, these games are always going to have huge budgets behind them. But when it comes to like your typical AAA fare that you get, I don't think they all need to be or will continue forever to constantly grow in budget and complexity and dev times, because it's becoming ridiculous. I mean, like 5 or 6 years to make a single player game or AAA game is insane. And what used to be 3 or 4, it used to be 2 or 3 years, then kind of went 3 or 4, and now it's kind of like 4 or 5 going on 6. Or in some cases, obviously some developers will take longer, and then that's fine if your game's huge, but it's like, I don't think we need this, and I don't think every game needs to look, absolutely next gen, fully like crazy graphics and everything like that. And so it almost makes me think, look, does that mean Game Pass is going to become even more unsustainable? Like, really? Because you're spending more money on games, they're taking longer to make? Like, it doesn't make any sense. And obviously, if this deal does go through, you're risking further consolidation because PlayStation are going to be looking at studios, and they already have, that they're going to buy. And that's not really what PlayStation have been doing, because a lot of their acquisitions over time have been a little bit more organic, who they've worked with for a while before actually buying them. Or that publisher, or that, sorry, developer, they've published games, or they've released games on PlayStation, and only PlayStation for a long time. Again, that's not the case always. Like, as of late, in the last couple of years, it hasn't been, but pretty much up to that point, it has been. And obviously, a lot of people look at, again, say, but like, oh, PlayStation got these exclusives, well, it's fine for Xbox One. PlayStation doesn't need everything, but it's like, but the first party games for both Xbox and PlayStation have always been a staple of both platforms, and more so with PlayStation. But I just don't. Xbox have slowed in their competition in that regard for a while, and also not had great management, which has led to things like Redfall and Halo Infinite's launch being the way they were. Um, and there are obviously other exclusives that PlayStation has, like with Final Fantasy from Square Enix. But it's like, but Square Enix have been close to PlayStation for a while. They used to, I think, be close with Nintendo, but now it's more PlayStation. It is strange that Final Fantasy VII Remake looked like it was coming to Xbox, and then it didn't. Final Fantasy 16 says that it's only going to be on PlayStation until the end of this year, and then after that it can come to other platforms, seemingly. But will that be the case? I almost think it might not be, and I think it is a good game to have as your first party lineup. But people will also look at things like Spider-Man, and they'll be like, oh yeah, but Spider-Man, you have Spider-Man, so why can't Xbox have Call of Duty? And it's like, well, Xbox was actually, fun fact, Xbox was actually offered Spider-Man, and they turned it down. And on top of that, Insomniac have pretty much primarily been PlayStation focused for their entire history. Not entirely true, because they've done things for like Sunset Overdrive, and they've done some VR stuff, but they've still been heavily PlayStation. And what's funny is this whole exclusive fare doesn't just apply to PlayStation, because it applies to Xbox too. I don't know if anyone remembers when Xbox used to get Call of Duty DLCs a month early, which I know there's a mode, like, for example, the Call of Duty games, I think Modern Warfare 2019 and Black Ops Cold War, and I'm not sure about Vanguard, they had like a mode that was exclusive to PlayStation for a year. That's pretty silly. It shouldn't. That's I don't like that. But then though, it's not like every DLC. Most of their early access stuff is only a week. I don't think there's actually much exclusive stuff happening now anyway, outside of the usual like cosmetic packs. Um, but Xbox have also done things like where they had Rise of the Tomb Raider, exclusive for a year as well. But what was kind of a bit shady with that was that Xbox were really cagey on any information. Like, they didn't want to talk about it, whether it was exclusive fully, whether it was timed. They said it was timed, I think, but they didn't really want to say how long or give any information to that. And it's also things like Xbox also embargo information of games that are shown at their showcase to make it, and it gives it the appearance that those games are only coming to Xbox. And we had that with the Persona 3 remake and Persona 5 Tactica just recently. But it happened last year when they announced the Persona 3 and Persona 4 ports. And it's just, I think both companies, both PlayStation and Xbox, are, guilty of weird deals like this. But it's like, if you're against exclusives, why? And I don't think exclusives are bad, by the way. I think like exclusive modes, like for a year especially, that's stupid. And exclusive features like the 2 loadout slots, that's stupid. I don't know why PlayStation does that. But these first party games, they are like staples. They should be there. That's what you want to sell your platform. But if you're really against exclusives, why do you want Xbox buying everything? I know and obviously it's competitive from a business standpoint, but I almost say it's anti-competitive for gaming because it's less creative. It's like, oh, we'll just buy everything. That's what we'll do, you know. And it's like, if you think about it, Last of Us Part 2 cost PlayStation $220 million to make. This Activision deal that Microsoft's trying to buy them, is costing them $69 billion. Like, imagine how many potential high quality games Xbox could make with that money that they're otherwise spending on Activision. It's not exactly that that's how it's going to work, but that just puts it into perspective, you know. And I don't think Xbox have really proved that they have a lot of first party offerings, but then they've got these really smaller games, these smaller games that have come out like Pentiment and Hi-Fi Rush that are really good. So, yeah, it's just frustrating to see that this is kind of the road that things are going down for them. To kind of wrap all of this up, though, um, it's something I saw tweet about on Twitter a few weeks, a couple of weeks ago about this, is that we shouldn't really be taking sides for either PlayStation or Xbox because we should only really be in it for what's best for games. And I know that sounds really almost cringy. It's like, oh yeah, do it for games kind of thing. But it's like, but it is. It's like, what are we really fighting for? Like, these are companies that are obviously leading the charge on these platforms, but we want them to be better. The competition, like, if this does lead to, if Xbox get Activision and it leads to more competition from PlayStation, then, like, that's great. But as what I said earlier, I would prefer their efforts better spent in a single player AAA space, rather than trying to focus on making a COD competitor. And maybe they wouldn't necessarily need to compete directly. Maybe it doesn't have to be an FPS. And they have got an FPS in development from, is it Fire? It's either Fire Sprite or Firewalk. Those two, I always get those two confused. Um, I know there's some Bungie devs that are working there. I think that sounds promising. Concord is the game, by the way. That's the name of the game. And yeah, like, it's possible one of those could compete in some form, but at the same time, it's like, well, hopefully that's going to happen. But it's like, I don't really want just live service games. That's what I've said before. Because most people who play on PlayStation want the single player games. Doesn't mean you want multiplayer games. We can have both. Like, there's totally room for both, for multiple to exist. But it's like, I just don't want that being the situation. Now, I don't think it will be a case where COD is exclusive. I don't think that will maybe ever happen. Maybe it will someday, but not right now, and certainly not soon. But it's even with things like, there's so many other IPs here, like Spyro, Crash, and I can't think of any now. But there's so many Activision franchises, that you don't really. I don't want them going exclusive, and I think, and it doesn't sound like that they would stay multi-platform. It sounds like, I think again, Microsoft has said, much like Bethesda, they kind of evaluate it on a case by case. But I don't. I'm curious to know what it is that's different about certain games. Why I guess they just look at data and is it going to be a loss if they don't release on PlayStation? But it's like Starfield. I mean, it's like, if that went to PlayStation, I'm like, I feel like you'd sell so much, and I kind of don't know why. But I guess it gets people to get Xbox, so it could come to PlayStation eventually. So I understand that aspect. But it's also like, I don't know, keep it as your exclusive, you know. Um, but I fundamentally believe, because Activision is such a huge publisher, you know, they're like the biggest in the world. I'm pretty certain, or at least if they're not the biggest, they are like top three, top five, surely. Like I think it's like, I'm pretty sure they are like the biggest. Um, I just don't think that another company should be able to just buy them up, particularly not a platform holder. Because they are, they're just, you know, it's they've got some of the biggest franchises in the world, and they're making so much money in there. So it's almost like, is it really good to have consolidation on that level? You know, I think buying indie studios and kind of things like that is not too bad. You know, or buying individual developers, but buying an entire publisher just seems so extreme. You know, but it's like, I might come across in this as I have more of a bias to PlayStation, but, you know, make no mistake, I think Xbox's upcoming slate of games is actually more interesting than what PlayStation have shown. Now, maybe that will change, you know, if we get into the PlayStation showcase or something this year, we might see more, and then that might change. But I don't know, like Starfield, I think looks incredible. Like, I'm very much looking forward to Starfield, and it's only 2 months away. And you've got games like Avowed and Clockwork Revolution, Fable, they Xbox had a really good show, a strong showing, and I think that it's a great lineup. I just don't like this approach to domination and competition with basically just sheer cash alone. It's obviously a very good business move. It's very good for them, and it is interesting to kind of see this play out. But I just don't know if this is a good thing for the industry, really. And again, it's much like I said before. This should be about us wanting what's best for games and hoping that whatever happens, it's going to result in something positive for the industry overall, whether it's more competition or what. But I just believe that competition should be more in creativity, not who's got the deepest pockets, you know. And Xbox is basically opening the floodgates for more deals like this. And anyone supporting that, I just don't quite understand it. Like, I don't know, like, why do you care if they own them or not? Like, it's, you know, I understand some part that maybe they want, like, I've heard people say that maybe, you know, people want Xbox to have a win, so they're sort of hoping that this will be the thing. But yeah, I don't know. Ironically, this it's like people like say this, but it's like it's probably going to lead to more exclusives. You know, doing something like this again. Like I think it's interesting to see play out. And we'll see what happens. We could get a decision this week, and that could seal the deal, or it could call off the deal. Like, who knows? I don't really know. I mean, I don't really know enough about the legal and law and aspects of this. It's very complicated and, you know, confusing. But hopefully, whatever happens, it's going to lead to both sides making better stuff, better games, you know, better products. So yeah, we'll leave that for there, and sort of related in the fact that it's an Activision Blizzard property. I wanted to talk about Diablo 4 getting its next season, or sorry, next season, its first season. Uh, they've sort of recently, the past few days or earlier this week, they, at the time of recording, they announced that it was called, the season is called Season of the Malignant, and it begins on the 20th of July. Uh, and basically, these seasons, rather than add like fully new content, like a new activity, like, you know, like a separate new thing, um, it's basically adding like a new seasonal loop into the game as part of its seasonal realm. And for this season, it's basically a set of malignant or corrupted bosses that kind of they spawn randomly in the world, and basically you can kill them. They drop a heart. You try and capture the heart. It respawns the boss as a stronger version. Then you kill the boss, and then it drops the heart for good. And that heart can be slotted into your gear, which basically gives you bonuses. But these bonuses, as they said on their live stream, they're basically like legendary bonuses. They're very strong, they're powerful, and so these are going to kind of dictate and lead to, you know, seemingly much stronger builds, essentially. And you can also go to, if you want to kind of target farm those, you can go to these places called Malignant Tunnels, and they're basically like replayable dungeons that allow you to kind of, you know, target farm. As far as I understand it, allows you to target farm these hearts. And there'll also be a unique boss here as well that you can fight as well that's new. And so obviously alongside that, you've kind of got your usual bells and whistles for a season two. And so you've got something called the season journey alongside a battle pass. And so the season journey is basically a tracker for what you've accomplished in the season, and that rewards favor and additional aspects and items. Favor is what you need to level the battle pass, and you can also earn favor from other sources like fighting monsters and doing other activities in the game. And then the Battle Pass, as many of you probably know, is much like it is in any other game with a set of free and premium rewards. There's 27 free tiers and 63 paid, 27 free rewards and 63 paid rewards that you get. Everything is purely cosmetic outside of the outside some boosts that can increase your gold and XP, but those are only on the free tiers. They're not. You can't pay them. Obviously, I think you can pay to level up the pass, but you can't actually pay to. The paid battle pass itself does not unlock those. And essentially, so for Diablo seasons, you have to create a new character to actually play in the season. And when you create a character, you get given the option to load into the Eternal Realm or the Seasonal Realm. Obviously, the Seasonal Realm is where the season exists, and you essentially use that character to the end of the season, and at the end of the season, the character that you created, that you've been using in the Seasonal Realm, gets moved over to the Eternal Realm, and all of the season-specific rewards you've got, such as these Malignant Hearts, will disappear, essentially. And so, yeah, I'm not sure on this whole idea. I wasn't sure, like, I'm new to Diablo, kind of thing, like, I'm other than Diablo 3, and, I thought their stream was really good, and their developers are very candid and upfront. It was, at first, I was a little bit underwhelmed, because I didn't have a problem with starting a new character, but I was expecting something a bit more continuous, where you kind of create a character and you were going to use them beyond that season. But, because of the fact that all of the seasonal, specific items, like the Malignant Heart, like gems, won't carry across, which their reasoning makes sense. They basically said they don't carry across, otherwise you'd have to, it's like power creep, so it's kind of a temporary thing, and then you get to mess around with it, and then it disappears. But that to me was like, well, then the only thing you're really playing for is the Battle Pass and the Season Journey, which obviously you have to play in the Seasonal Realm to unlock that. And it's all this content's free, but obviously they wouldn't really be able to charge for it because it all disappears in 3 months, and the rewards, the kind of unique seasonal rewards, you also can't get after the season and will get taken away from you. And so I wasn't really sure on it, because I was like, well, that kind of feels like so people have been comparing this to Destiny, and I understand why, and I think it makes sense, and I think there's good comparisons you can make for sure. But I was expecting the seasons to be a little bit closer to Destiny. Now I know, Destiny is a different game, and obviously this is an ARPG, and people say, "Oh, but Diablo 3 was like this." It's like, yeah, but this is released. This Diablo 4 is coming out in 2023. There's probably going to be some things that are different, and I guarantee you there are. I haven't looked at what Diablo 3 has season-wise, but I'm sure there are some things that are different in this approach to season compared to what they were doing. But as I've sort of thought about it more, I've kind of come around a little bit on the idea, because I was kind of thinking that, as far as I know, the season journey has challenges that are connected to that new content. So you have to kind of involve yourself and actually use it to kind of complete these challenges, and then by completing them, you're earning favor and leveling up the battle pass. And so there is a little bit more of a loop that you can kind of get into there. But I'll be honest, I was actually surprised at how many Destiny 2 players were actually into this, because having to start afresh every season and losing core season items, I'm like, when Destiny did that, it didn't go very well. Not many people liked it. And that wasn't every season. That was like it was every season technically, but it wasn't exactly the same. It's a different style of doing it. But obviously, Destiny has a lot more permanence, whereas Diablo doesn't do the permanence. So yeah, you're just playing seasons to get. You're enjoying a different version of the season, or a different version of the game, essentially, with a unique feature or mechanic or system for the season. And as you're doing that, you're completing challenges and unlocking rewards for your main game, or for anywhere, basically, anywhere you want to use. And it's a bit of a weird system, but I also like the fact that it preserves the core experience, the core base experience that you can get on day one, outside of any quality of life changes, bug fixes, and extra new items. And there are also new legendaries and uniques being added, and they are being added to both the Eternal Realm and the Seasonal Realm as well. So yeah, we'll see how it plays out. I'll probably have more thoughts when we come back around to it. It's obviously coming out at the time of recording, comes out in 11 days, so I'll be curious, and I'll be probably checking that out as well. And so yeah, just as we wrap up this sort of episode, or this first episode, I'm just going to talk about a few things about what I'm planning to play upcoming. Obviously, Final Fantasy XVI is going to be dominating my time until I finish that, and I wouldn't mind going for the Platinum, so that means a New Game Plus run. Obviously, we've got Diablo 4's first season I've just mentioned. I am curious about Remnant 2, which I've not played the first, but I've heard good things about it, and the second does look pretty interesting. That comes out July 22nd, I believe. Immortals of Avium or Avium was originally coming out in July. I think it would have been next week actually, or maybe not. Maybe it was the week afterwards. But that's been pushed back to August, which is kind of nice. It kind of frees up a bit more time. And obviously September is where things really kick off in terms of game releases again. But seems like things are looking a little bit quiet. So my plan right now is to play and finish Final Fantasy 16, maybe start working on the Platinum. I've also just bought a bunch of Final Fantasy games as well. I've bought Final Fantasy 1 and 7, the originals, on PSN, and I've also ordered, just so I can have a physical collection, I've got 7 and 8 on Switch, I've got 8 on PS4 coming. World of Final Fantasy I already had on PSN, but I've got that physically. Final Fantasy Dissidia NT, I think it's called, which I don't think is apparently not very good, as far as I know, but I got that, as well as I got Final Fantasy 9 and Final Fantasy 10 as well. And I think I got Final Fantasy 12, the Zodiac Age as well. I can't fully remember, I think I got that as well. So I just got a bunch of games because they were sort of pretty cheap, and that's just kind of for collection purposes, but also I'm curious to check out a lot of these games, when I get them. I think Final Fantasy 1 I'm probably going to start soonish, but just to see what it's like, whether or not I'll play all of it, I don't know. But I would like to play these games, even if I don't love the gameplay, just kind of see what they were like, and the music, and, and these are obviously the pixel remasters for Final Fantasy 1 to 6, and so it'd just be cool to be able to play all these games, and I'm very curious to play, I want to play OG Final Fantasy 7, the original, and then play Remake. But we've also got Pikmin 4 coming out as well, I forgot to mention that. There's the demo of that, which I want to check out. And yeah, and obviously there's, Hitman I wouldn't mind playing a bit more of, Mario Kart 8, which is just getting its new booster course pass set of tracks on July 12th. So I don't own that, but that's still new content, and you can play all those tracks online even if you don't own it, as far as I know, so that's cool. And of course, yeah, this is on top of the usual, like, Destiny I'll be checking out, because it's got the seasonal event, summer event, sorry, on the 18th. And then at the end of next month, there's a new season and an expansion reveal, so that'll be interesting to see. But yeah, this has been cool, honestly. I felt like covering a lot of stuff. Obviously, it's not been too crazy in terms of news, but I think giving 2 weeks gives it a lot of time. These shows are probably going to be longer than the Destiny shows, I expect, because of the fact. But though this one was longer because I was talking about more games, and I spent a while rambling on about the Microsoft-Activision acquisition. But yeah, as I said, this has been cool. This is the first episode, obviously, so we'll see where it goes from here. It's called What I'm Playing, but that's a to be confirmed name. Who knows, where, if I'll change that, maybe I will. At least it's more descriptive than Untitled Destiny Podcast. It's better than that, I think. And as it'll be every 2 weeks, the next episode I'll be talking in late July. Hopefully after I've finished Final Fantasy 16 by that point, having played the Pikmin 4 demo, hopefully, and anything else I've been playing, and then any other news that I've been, that have sort of cropped up in the last last couple of weeks. We might have something on the Activision acquisition by that point, and who knows what else. And so I was thinking that, similar to the Untitled Destiny podcast, I did like an extra episode called like Extra, which was more of a spur of the moment idea, because I was going to do a highlight and just take a section of that podcast and re-upload it, kind of thing, just as almost like a mini promotion, but also to focus on one particular topic I spoke about, and then interviews dropped which was directly related to that. So I included that highlight, and then included an extra 25 minutes of thoughts based on those interviews, and elaborating on everything a bit deeper. And so maybe I'll do that here. I mentioned earlier that I was going to talk about my game of the year so far. I wouldn't mind talking about spoilers and just how people are so careless a lot of the time with them. Particularly because, again, I will not spoil anything here, but I saw an article on the website DualShockers where they've basically had the title Final Fantasy 16 : did X thing happen? And it was like blatantly calling out something that happens in the game, and that really pissed me off, just because I'm like, it's entirely done for clickbait, and I just don't have any sympathy or empathy or anything. I don't care. There's no excuse for that, and it's purely for clicks, and I find that incredibly frustrating. And though they should know better, journalists should know better. People that they literally write about a game. If you're writing about games, you should understand that people want to preserve that experience, especially for a game like, well, it doesn't even matter what game it is, but when it's this big game like Final Fantasy 16, no doubt other people have been spoiled on that. And so, a bit frustrating, because I did read DualShockers from time to time, so it's a shame to kind of have an article of theirs be so, uh, just, or it's blatantly spoiling something. And people are bad with spoilers anyway. I know I'm super picky, but this was like, I can't believe you have that as your title. Like, I actually cannot believe that. And for context, all I did was I was looking up what features the port of Final Fantasy VII, the original, what features that has, and that was their first article that showed up. I think the image on that looked like a spoilery image in the first place, so even it almost is arguably, I was like, have I been spoiled on something with Final Fantasy VII now as well? I'm not too sure. But yeah, and then on the right hand side of the page, they have like, here's other articles that you can check out, and the very first one there was that one, and I was like, I can't believe it. I tweeted about it, and yeah, pretty pissed off, honestly. But the game's still awesome, and I'm still loving it. So that's the good thing, but it doesn't excuse any of that what they did. Anyway, we'll see about that. I'll see how things go. Obviously, I'll be doing some freelance work this week with Eurogamer, so obviously I don't know fully when I'll have the time, at least for the first 3 days. I'm trying to stay consistent, trying to keep ahead of things, but we'll see how everything goes. But otherwise, that's it for this first episode. I hope you've enjoyed listening. As I said, be sure to leave any feedback, comments, or anything in the below. Any questions, anything you want me to talk about or hear my thoughts on, be sure to fire away, and I'll see you on the next episode. So thanks for listening, and have a good one. Ciao, ciao, ciao.